Have you ever watched someone destroy themselves while trying to destroy you? I should have known something was wrong when my phone started buzzing at 7:30 on a Tuesday morning. Not the gentle buzz of a text message, but the relentless vibration of notification after notification, the kind that makes your stomach drop before you even unlock the screen. My husband Elijah was already in the shower, getting ready for work, and I was still in bed scrolling through emails when it started. Facebook Messenger, Instagram, even my work email, all lighting up simultaneously. Friends I hadn't talked to in months, distant cousins, even my former college roommate who I only heard from on birthdays, all reaching out with variations of the same message. Are you okay? What's going on? Is this true? I can't believe Victoria would post something like this. My hands were shaking as I opened Facebook. The family group, Thompson Family Circle, had 47 new posts since I checked it the night before. 47. The group that usually got maybe 2 posts a week, mostly Victoria sharing articles about proper etiquette or Grayson posting photos from their latest vacation to wherever people with too much money and too much time go. And there, pinned at the top with over 200 comments already, was Victoria's manifesto. The post started with a paragraph about family values and loyalty, about how difficult it was to watch someone tear apart the bonds that had taken years to build, about how she tried to be understanding and patient but could no longer stay silent. Then came the screenshots. Dozens of them, carefully arranged in a photo album titled Evidence of Harper's True Character. I felt sick as I scrolled through them. Text messages, apparently from me, saying horrible things about the Thompson family. Calling Eleanor, my late grandmother-in-law, controlling and manipulative. Calling the family traditions ridiculous and outdated. Saying I couldn't wait to get my hands on the inheritance money so Elijah and I could finally stop pretending to care about these people. Except I'd never said any of those things. Well, not exactly like that. The bathroom door opened and Elijah walked out, towel around his waist, hair still dripping. He took one look at my face and his expression shifted from morning grogginess to immediate concern. "What's wrong?" he asked, sitting down on the edge of the bed. I handed him my phone without a word. I watched his face as he read, watched the color drain from his cheeks, watched his jaw tighten. He scrolled, and with each swipe I could see him pulling further away from me, not physically but emotionally, and that hurt worse than anything Victoria had written. "Harper," he said slowly, carefully, like he was trying very hard to keep his voice neutral. "Some of these, did you actually say these things?" "That was 3 years ago," I whispered. 3 years of trying to fit into a family that made it clear from day one that I wasn't good enough, that I didn't understand their world, that I was the girl from the wrong side of the tracks who'd somehow tricked their golden boy into marriage. Let me back up, because you need to understand how I got here, sitting in my bed at 7:30 in the morning watching my marriage crack apart in real time. I met Elijah 4 years ago at a coffee shop, of all places. He was in line ahead of me, and when the barista called out his ridiculously complicated order, I'd laughed. Not at him, exactly, but at the absurdity of a drink that required that many modifiers. He turned around, grinned, and said something like, I know, I'm that guy, and we started talking. He didn't tell me about the money at first. Didn't mention that his family owned half the commercial real estate in the city, that his grandfather had built an empire that his father had doubled, that the Thompson name opened doors I didn't even know existed. He was just Elijah, funny and kind and surprisingly down to earth, and by the time I figured out exactly who he was, I was already in love with him. Meeting the family was terrifying. His parents, Robert and Patricia Thompson, were polite but distant, the kind of people who smile while somehow making it clear you're being evaluated and found wanting. His younger sister Sophia was sweet but clearly uncomfortable, caught between being kind to me and maintaining her position in the family hierarchy. And then there was Grayson and Victoria. Grayson was 8 years older than Elijah, the responsible one, the one who'd gone into the family business right out of college and worked his way up to vice president. He was fine, actually, a bit stiff and overly serious but not unkind. Victoria, though. Victoria was something else entirely. She'd married into the family 8 years before I came along, and in that time she'd perfected the art of being indispensable. She organized every family gathering, remembered every birthday, knew exactly which caterer to call for which occasion, could navigate the complex social obligations of old money with the ease of someone who'd been born into it, even though she hadn't been. That was the thing about Victoria. She was like me, an outsider who'd married in, but she'd worked so hard to erase any trace of her origins that she'd become more Thompson than the actual Thompsons. And she saw me as a threat to everything she'd built. The first family dinner I attended, she'd made a point of explaining every single item of silverware to me, speaking slowly and clearly as if I might not understand basic English. When I'd instinctively reached for the wrong fork, she'd laughed, this tinkling sound that wasn't quite cruel but wasn't quite kind either, and said, "Oh, don't worry, honey, you'll learn." Elijah had squeezed my hand under the table, and later, in the car, he'd apologized. "She's just protective of the family," he'd said. "She means well." I wasn't so sure. Over the next year, as Elijah and I got more serious, Victoria's behavior escalated. She started a private Facebook group, Thompson Family Circle, supposedly to make communication easier, but it quickly became clear that it was her kingdom. She controlled who got added, what got posted, what the narrative was. And the narrative was simple. Victoria was the perfect daughter-in-law, the one who understood the family, the one who knew how things should be done. When Elijah proposed and I said yes, Victoria insisted on being involved in every aspect of the wedding planning. Every decision I made, she had a better suggestion. The venue I'd chosen wasn't suitable for a Thompson wedding, the florist I'd found didn't understand the aesthetic we needed, the menu I'd selected was too casual. I tried to push back, gently at first. These were my wedding choices, Elijah's and mine, and I wanted them to reflect who we were as a couple. But every time I stood my ground, Victoria would post something in the family group. "Just want to make sure everyone knows I tried to help Harper understand our traditions. I hope the wedding reflects well on the family even if some of the choices are unconventional." The implication was clear. If the wedding was anything less than perfect by Thompson standards, it would be my fault for not listening to her guidance. Elijah tried to mediate. He loved his brother, looked up to Grayson in a lot of ways, and he didn't want to cause family drama. "Can't you just compromise a little?" he'd ask. "She has more experience with these things. It would mean a lot to the family." So I compromised. And compromised. And compromised. Until our wedding looked almost nothing like what I'd imagined and everything like a Victoria Thompson production. The wedding itself was beautiful, objectively speaking. The flowers were perfect, the food was excellent, the speeches were touching. But standing there in a dress that Victoria had helped me choose, at a venue that Victoria had recommended, surrounded by decorations that Victoria had approved, I felt like a stranger at my own wedding. Still, I thought, once we were married, once I was officially part of the family, things would get better. They didn't. Eleanor Thompson, Elijah's grandmother, was 92 years old and sharp as a tack. She lived in the family estate, a sprawling mansion that had been in the Thompson family for 3 generations, and she ruled over family gatherings with a mix of affection and iron will. I liked Eleanor, actually. She was one of the few family members who treated me like a person rather than an inconvenient addition to the family tree. She'd asked about my job, my interests, my opinions on things that had nothing to do with the Thompson family legacy. When Victoria would start in on one of her subtle criticisms, Eleanor would sometimes interrupt with a sharp comment that left Victoria flustered and defensive. I think Eleanor saw through Victoria's performance, recognized another outsider trying too hard to fit in, and had more sympathy for my approach of staying true to myself. About a year after the wedding, Eleanor's health started declining. Nothing dramatic at first, just the slow fate of someone who'd lived a very long and very full life. The family started gathering more often, Sunday dinners at the estate becoming mandatory rather than optional, everyone wanting to spend time with her while they still could. That's when the real problem started. Victoria began positioning herself as Eleanor's primary caregiver, even though Eleanor had a full-time nurse and didn't really need help with daily activities. She'd show up at the estate every day, posting photos in the family group of her making tea for Eleanor, reading to her, helping her with correspondence. "Look at our sweet time together," the captions would say. So grateful for every moment with this incredible woman. It felt performative, like everything Victoria did, but I kept my mouth shut. If she wanted to spend time with her grandmother-in-law, that was her choice. But then she started making decisions. Eleanor wanted to update her will, and Victoria somehow became the person coordinating with the lawyers, scheduling meetings, being present for discussions that should have been private. When I mentioned to Elijah that it seemed odd for Victoria to be so involved, he shrugged. Grayson's the oldest, he said. It makes sense that Victoria would help. Besides, you know how organized she is. 6 months ago, Eleanor passed away peacefully in her sleep. The funeral was enormous, hundreds of people whose lives she'd touched over 9 decades. Victoria, of course, had organized everything, from the service to the reception, and she'd done it beautifully. I had to give her that. The will reading was scheduled for 2 weeks after the funeral, time for everyone to grieve before dealing with the practicalities of the estate. We all gathered in the lawyer's office, Robert and Patricia, Grayson and Victoria, Sophia, Elijah and me, plus a few cousins and extended family members. The estate was substantial. The house alone was worth several million, plus investments, savings, jewelry, art. Eleanor had been a wealthy woman in her own right, separate from what she'd inherited from her husband. The lawyer, Harrison Foster, a man in his 60s who'd apparently known Eleanor for decades, cleared his throat and began reading. Most of the estate would go to Robert, Eleanor's son, which made sense. But there was a separate fund, $450,000, that she'd designated specifically for her grandchildren. The fund was to be divided equally among Grayson, Sophia, and Elijah, $150,000 each, with one very specific condition. The distribution would only happen if the family maintained harmony, Eleanor's word, during the 6-month settlement period. If there was evidence of infighting, manipulation, or attempts to turn family members against each other, Harrison had the discretion to withhold or redistribute the funds. It was a classic Eleanor move, I realized. She'd seen too many families torn apart by inheritance disputes, and she wanted to make sure hers stayed together. Victoria's face had gone very still when Harrison read that part. Grayson looked uncomfortable. Elijah just looked sad. After the reading, Victoria had pulled me aside. "I hope this doesn't cause any problems," she'd said, her voice dripping with false concern. "I know money can make people behave badly. Just remember, we're family now, and family sticks together." The subtext was clear. Don't rock the boat, don't cause drama, don't do anything that might jeopardize the inheritance. I'd nodded and smiled and said of course, and gone home feeling vaguely threatened. That was when things got weird in the family group chat. Victoria started posting more frequently, long missives about family values and loyalty, about Eleanor's legacy and what she would have wanted. She created new traditions, mandatory Sunday dinners continuing even after Eleanor's death, monthly family outings, a complex calendar of obligations that everyone was expected to follow. When I mentioned to Elijah that I couldn't make every single Sunday dinner because of my work schedule, Victoria had immediately posted in the group. "So sad that not everyone prioritizes family time. I know Eleanor would have been disappointed, but we'll carry on our traditions with those who truly care." I'd made the next 3 Sunday dinners, swapping shifts and calling in favors at work, because the alternative was being publicly shamed in front of the entire family. But it wasn't enough. Nothing was ever enough. When I brought store-bought dessert to a dinner instead of homemade, Victoria posted a photo of her elaborate homemade tart with the caption, "Some of us still believe in putting effort into family gatherings." When I wore jeans to a casual barbecue, she posted about maintaining standards and dressing appropriately for family events. When I had to leave a dinner early for a work emergency, she posted about commitment and priorities. Every single thing I did was documented, commented on, used as evidence of my failure to meet Thompson family standards. And Elijah, God love him, didn't see it. Or didn't want to see it. "She's just passionate about family," he'd say. "She doesn't mean anything by it. Can't you try a little harder to get along with her?" I was trying. I was trying so hard I was exhausted. But nothing I did was right, and slowly, imperceptibly, I was being positioned as the problem, the outsider who didn't understand, the daughter-in-law who didn't appreciate the family she'd married into. 3 months after Eleanor's death, I'd finally snapped. It was a Sunday dinner, and I'd worked a double shift the day before, covering for a coworker who'd called in sick. I was exhausted, running on 4 hours of sleep and too much coffee, and I'd completely forgotten that I'd promised to bring a side dish. I'd shown up empty-handed, apologetic, offering to run to the store, but Victoria had already posted in the group. Harper forgot her contribution again. Good thing I always make extra to cover for those who can't be bothered to follow through on their commitments. Something in me broke. I pulled out my phone right there at the dinner table and typed out a response in the family group. Maybe if someone didn't create impossible standards and then shame people for being human, we'd all be a lot less stressed. I'm working full-time and trying my best, but apparently that's not good enough for the Thompson family standards. I'd hit send before I could stop myself. The table had gone silent. Victoria's face had turned red, then white. Grayson had looked uncomfortable. Robert and Patricia had exchanged glances. Sophia had stared at her plate. And Elijah had looked at me like I'd just committed an unforgivable sin. Victoria had recovered quickly, her voice shaking with what sounded like genuine hurt. "I'm just trying to maintain the traditions that Eleanor loved," she'd said. "I'm sorry if you find that difficult, Harper. I know adjusting to our family hasn't been easy for you." The implication was clear. The problem wasn't her impossible standards, it was my inability to meet them. I'd left early, Elijah following after making awkward apologies. In the car, he'd been angrier than I'd ever seen him. "You can't just attack Victoria like that in front of everyone," he'd said. "She's been nothing but welcoming to you. She's trying to help." I tried to explain, tried to make him see the pattern of behavior, the constant criticism disguised as concern, the way she was systematically positioning me as the problem. But he didn't want to hear it. He just wanted peace, wanted his family to get along, wanted me to stop making things difficult. We had our first real fight that night, voices raised and tears shed, and for the first time since we'd gotten married, I'd wondered if we were going to make it. The next morning, Victoria had sent me a private message. "I understand you're going through something, Harper, and I want you to know I forgive you for your outburst. Family means forgiving each other's mistakes. But I think we need to have a serious conversation about your attitude and how it's affecting everyone." I hadn't responded. Over the next few months, I tried to be more careful. I made every Sunday dinner, always brought homemade contributions, dressed appropriately, stayed for the entire duration of events, bit my tongue when Victoria made her little comments. I was trying to make it to the 6-month mark, to get through the settlement period without causing the kind of drama that might jeopardize the inheritance. Not for the money, exactly, though $150,000 would certainly change our lives. But because I knew that if the inheritance was affected because of me, because of my inability to get along with the family, Elijah would never forgive me. But I'd still texted my best friend Maya Garcia, venting about the situation. I'd still complained to my sister Isabella about the impossible standards and the constant judgment. I'd still expressed frustration in private conversations, saying things I needed to say to stay sane. Things like Eleanor was an amazing woman, but her family dynamics were complicated, and I wish they didn't treat every gathering like a performance. Things like these Thompson traditions feel more about control than connection sometimes. Things like I'll be glad when the estate is settled and we can maybe have some breathing room from all this family intensity. Nothing horrible. Nothing untrue. Just the normal venting that anyone does about their in-laws, the kind of private conversations that keep you from saying something you'd regret in public. Except they weren't private anymore. Because Victoria had been screenshotting every text I'd sent in the family group, carefully cropping out context, removing her own responses, and compiling them into a narrative that made me look like a terrible person. And now, 3 days before the 6-month mark, 3 days before the estate settlement was supposed to be finalized, she posted all of it publicly for the entire extended family to see. Elijah was still reading through the screenshots, his face unreadable. Finally, he looked up at me. "Did you say these things?" he asked quietly. "Some of them," I admitted. "But not like that, not altogether like that, and never in the family group. Those were private texts to my friends and family, Elijah." "How did she even get them?" He shook his head slowly. "I don't know, but Harper, some of these are really harsh. Calling my grandmother manipulative, saying you can't wait to stop pretending to care about my family, that's not just venting, that's cruel." "I never said that," I insisted, grabbing the phone back and looking more carefully. "Look at this one, look at the date stamp. That's from right after our wedding, when Victoria was criticizing every decision I'd made. And this part, where it says I can't wait to stop pretending, that's not even my writing style. Look at the punctuation, I never use semicolons like that." Elijah wanted to believe me, I could see it in his eyes, but the doubt was there too. And that doubt was exactly what Victoria had been cultivating for 3 years. His phone rang. Grayson. He answered, listened for a moment, then said, "Yeah, I saw it." "We're talking." "No, I don't know." "Okay. We'll be there." He hung up and looked at me. Family meeting at Grayson and Victoria's house, 1 hour. Everyone's expected to be there. I felt sick. "This is it," I said. "This is her play. 3 days before the settlement, and she's manufactured a crisis that makes me look like the villain. If there's a family meeting where everyone's against me, where there's documented evidence that I've been causing disharmony, Harrison can withhold the inheritance or redistribute it. She's trying to get me and you excluded. Don't you see that?" Elijah rubbed his face with both hands. "That's a pretty serious accusation, Harper." "Look at the timing," I said desperately. "Look at the pattern. She's been building this narrative for 3 years, positioning herself as the perfect daughter-in-law and me as the problem, and now, right before the money gets distributed, she presents all this evidence of my terrible behavior. She's going to push for us to be excluded and claim it's about maintaining family harmony." "That's not how Victoria is," Elijah said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Isn't it?" I asked. "Has she ever made you feel like you're good enough, like you're meeting her standards, like you're doing things the right way? Or does she always have a better suggestion, a more appropriate option, a subtle criticism disguised as helpful guidance?" He didn't answer, which was answer enough. We drove to Grayson and Victoria's house in tense silence. They lived in a beautiful colonial in an exclusive neighborhood, the kind of place where the lawns were always perfect and the holiday decorations were always tasteful. Victoria had decorated it herself, of course, and it looked like something out of a magazine, beautiful but somehow cold, lacking any real personality. The whole family was there when we arrived. Robert and Patricia in the living room, looking grave. Sophia on the love seat, her eyes red like she'd been crying. Grayson standing by the fireplace, his expression carefully neutral. And Victoria, perched on the edge of an armchair, looking like a wronged woman bravely facing her accuser. "Harper," Robert said as we entered. "Elijah. Please, sit down." We sat on the couch, and I felt like a defendant in the trial I hadn't known I was attending. Victoria spoke first, her voice trembling slightly. "I want to start by saying how much this hurts me. I've tried so hard to welcome Harper into our family, to help her understand our traditions, to include her in everything we do. And to discover that she's been saying these horrible things about us, about Eleanor, it's just devastating." I opened my mouth to respond, but Robert held up a hand. "Let her finish, please." Victoria continued, gaining momentum. "I know I'm not perfect, and I know adjusting to a new family is hard. But I've done everything I can to make Harper feel welcome, and instead of appreciating that, she's been complaining about us behind our backs, calling us manipulative and controlling, saying she can't wait to get the inheritance money so she can stop pretending to care about this family." She pulled out her phone, began reading from it. "And it's not just private comments to friends. She's been saying these things in the family group too, stirring up drama, criticizing our traditions, making everyone uncomfortable." "That's not true," I said, my voice sharper than I'd intended. "I never said those things in the family group, and the private texts you're quoting were taken out of context." Victoria's eyes widened, hurt and disbelief warring on her face. "Are you calling me a liar, Harper? After everything I've done for you?" "I'm saying you've manipulated the narrative," I said. "You've been screening my messages, cropping out your responses, removing context, building a case against me for 3 years, and now you're presenting it as evidence that I'm the problem. But the real problem is that you see me as a threat to your position in this family, and you're willing to destroy my marriage to protect it." The room went very quiet. "That's quite an accusation," Grayson said carefully. "It's the truth," I said, my heart pounding. "Victoria has made it her mission to prove I don't belong in this family from day one. Every criticism, every post about maintaining standards, every subtle comment about my choices has been designed to position me as the outsider who doesn't measure up. And now, 3 days before the estate settles, she's manufactured this crisis to try to get Elijah and me excluded from the inheritance." Victoria's face had gone pale, then flushed red. "How dare you," she whispered. "How dare you suggest I would manipulate family for money?" I've given everything to this family, sacrificed my own comfort to maintain Eleanor's traditions, tried to help you become someone this family could be proud of, and this is how you repay me." She stood up abruptly. "I need air," she said, and practically ran from the room. Grayson followed her, and I could hear their voices in the hallway, Victoria's sobs carrying through the walls. Patricia looked at me with disappointment. "Harper, I know you and Victoria have had your differences, but to accuse her of fraud in front of the whole family, that's very serious." "So is systematically destroying someone's reputation," I said, but my voice was shaking now. "I'm not the villain here, I promise you. I've been trying so hard to fit in, to meet impossible standards, and nothing I do is ever good enough. And now Victoria has presented carefully curated evidence that makes me look terrible, and none of you are even questioning why she had all those screenshots ready to go, why she posted them 3 days before the settlement, why she's been documenting every perceived slight for 3 years." Robert and Patricia exchanged glances. Elijah was silent beside me, and when I looked at him, I couldn't read his expression. Grayson came back into the room, his face tight. "Victoria's very upset," he said. "She feels attacked and betrayed, and honestly, I can understand why. These screenshots, Harper, they're damning. And to now claim they're manipulated without any proof, that's a serious accusation." "I have proof," I said suddenly, pulling out my phone. "I have my actual text conversations, with full context, showing exactly what was said and when. We can compare them to Victoria's screenshots and see what she removed." But even as I said it, I realized the problem. My word against hers, my phone against her screenshots, and I was already cast as the villain in this story. "I think everyone needs to calm down," Sophia said quietly. "This is exactly the kind of family disharmony that Eleanor warned against. Maybe we should table this discussion until emotions aren't so high." "With all due respect," I said, "that's exactly what Victoria wants. To create chaos right before the settlement, claim I'm causing disharmony, and use that to argue for our exclusion from the inheritance." Or, Grayson said coldly, "You're causing actual disharmony by making wild accusations against my wife, and the inheritance clause is working exactly as intended." I felt tears burning behind my eyes but refused to let them fall. Elijah finally spoke. "I think we need to see those full text conversations, Harper. All of them. And we need to compare them to what Victoria posted." He wasn't defending me, wasn't automatically taking my side, but he wasn't dismissing me either. It was something. I pulled up my messages, started screenshotting everything, sending them to the family group in real time. Every conversation Victoria had quoted, shown in full context, with dates and timestamps visible. The room was silent as everyone checked their phones, reading through the actual conversations versus Victoria's curated versions. And that's when I saw it. One of Victoria's screenshots, one I barely glanced at before because it was supposedly a conversation I'd had with my sister Isabella. But now, looking at it more carefully on my phone screen, I noticed something off about the margins, about the way the text was formatted. I zoomed in, and my heart stopped. In the black space at the edge of the screenshot, barely visible, was a reflection. The faint outline of another screen, showing a conversation that definitely wasn't the one Victoria claimed to be screenshotting. And in that reflection, clear as day if you knew what you were looking at, was a text message between Victoria and Grayson. I zoomed in further, my hands shaking, and managed to make out partial text. "Get rid of Harper before," one line read. "Make her look crazy," read another. "Delete my responses," said a third. "Oh my God," I breathed. "What?" Elijah asked, leaning over to look at my screen. I showed him, showed everyone, my voice gaining strength as I explained. "This screenshot, the one Victoria claims, shows me saying horrible things about the family. Look at the edge of it. Look at the reflection in the black space. That's her computer screen reflecting, and it's showing a conversation between her and Grayson about getting rid of me before the estate settles." Everyone crowded around to see, and I watched their faces change as they realized what they were looking at. Victoria burst back into the room, her eyes red but her jaw set. "I've decided I'm willing to forgive," she started, then stopped when she saw everyone huddled around my phone. "Victoria," Robert said slowly. "Did you fabricate these text messages?" "No," she said immediately. "No, of course not. Those are real texts from Harper." Then explain this, I said, holding up my phone to show the incriminating screenshot. Explain why your conversation with Grayson about getting rid of me before the estate settles is reflected in the margin of a screenshot you claim shows my actual texts. Victoria's face went from red to white in an instant. That's not. You're misreading it, she stammered. Grayson took the phone from me, zoomed in, and I watched all the color drain from his face. Victoria, what is this? It's not what it looks like, she said desperately. You're taking it out of context. The irony of that statement was not lost on anyone in the room. I'd like to see your phone, please, Robert said, his voice harder than I'd ever heard it. Victoria's and Grayson's both. We didn't do anything wrong, Victoria said, but her voice was rising, panicky. We were just protecting the family, protecting Eleanor's legacy. Harper doesn't understand us, doesn't respect our traditions. We were trying to preserve what Eleanor built. By lying, Patricia asked quietly. By manipulating evidence. By trying to exclude your brother-in-law from his inheritance. It's not like that, Grayson said, but he sounded defeated. Victoria thought, we were worried about. About what? Elijah asked, and his voice was ice cold. Worried that I'd get the same amount of inheritance as you. Worried that the youngest son might not look up to his older brother quite so much anymore. Worried that your wife's position as family matriarch might be threatened by someone who actually cared about Grandma Eleanor instead of just performing care for an audience. The room erupted then, everyone talking over each other, Victoria crying, Grayson trying to explain, Patricia demanding to see their phones, Robert calling Harrison Foster. I just sat there, feeling oddly calm now that the truth was finally out. Elijah took my hand, squeezed it tight, and whispered, I'm so sorry. I should have seen it. I should have believed you. I squeezed back, too overwhelmed to speak. The next few hours were a blur. Harrison arrived with another lawyer, someone who specialized in fraud cases apparently. Victoria and Grayson's phones were examined, showing months of conversations about controlling the family narrative, about positioning me as the problem, about timing the revelation for maximum impact before the settlement. The screenshots Victoria had posted were forensically analyzed, showing that she'd used photo editing software to alter some of my texts, changing words and removing her own inflammatory messages that had prompted my responses. The conversation about making me look crazy and deleting her responses was real, laid out in black and white on Grayson's phone. Eleanor's will included a clause Harrison had hoped never to use. Any heir found to be manipulating the inheritance process or deliberately causing family disharmony for financial gain would forfeit their share entirely. Victoria and Grayson's $150,000 would be redistributed, $75,000 each to Sophia and Elijah. But more than the money, more than the vindication, was the look on Elijah's face as he realized how badly he'd failed to protect me, how close he'd come to losing me because he'd refused to see what Victoria really was. We didn't stay for the rest of the meeting. We went home, and we talked for hours, really talked for the first time in months. He apologized, over and over, for not believing me, for making me feel alone in my own marriage, for choosing family peace over standing up for his wife. I forgave him, because I loved him, but I also made something very clear. This can never happen again, I said. I need to know that you see me, that you believe me, that you're on my team even when it's uncomfortable or inconvenient. He promised he would be, and I chose to believe him. The fallout was spectacular. Victoria deleted all her social media accounts and moved back to her hometown in Ohio within a month, her marriage to Grayson crumbling under the weight of what they'd done. Grayson stayed in the city but became a pariah in the family, his relationship with Elijah possibly damaged beyond repair. The rest of the family, to their credit, apologized. Patricia especially, who admitted she'd always found Victoria a bit much but had appreciated her organizational skills enough to overlook the warning signs. We should have questioned why she was so invested in controlling every narrative, she said. We should have protected you better. Sophia and I became close, bonding over our shared experience of trying to navigate Victoria's impossible standards. She admitted she'd always been intimidated by her sister-in-law, afraid of being the next target if she stepped out of line. The inheritance was settled. Elijah and I got our $150,000, plus the additional $75,000 from Grayson's forfeited share. $225,000 that we used to buy a house of our own, to start building a life that was ours rather than an extension of the Thompson family legacy. But more valuable than any inheritance was what I learned about standing up for myself, about trusting my own perceptions even when everyone around me is suggesting I'm wrong, about the importance of having a partner who believes you when you say something's wrong. Looking back now, 2 years later, I can see how close I came to losing everything: my marriage, my sanity, my sense of self. Victoria's campaign of subtle manipulation was insidious precisely because it was so gradual, so careful, so plausibly deniable at every turn. If she hadn't made that one mistake, if she hadn't been so arrogant in her certainty that no one would look too closely at her evidence, if that reflection hadn't been visible in that one screenshot, her plan might have worked. But she did make that mistake. And in trying to prove I was the villain, she accidentally exposed herself as the real antagonist in this family drama. Sometimes I wonder if Eleanor knew, if she'd seen through Victoria's performance the same way she'd seen to see through everything else. If that inheritance clause wasn't just about preventing general family discord but was specifically designed to catch someone like Victoria in the act. I like to think so. I like to think Eleanor gave us the tools we needed to protect ourselves, even after she was gone. And I like to think she'd be proud of how it all turned out, proud that I stood my ground, proud that the truth came out, proud that her family survived Victoria's machinations and came out stronger on the other side. These days, family dinners are smaller, more intimate, held at different houses instead of always at Victoria's perfectly decorated showplace. We order pizzas sometimes instead of preparing elaborate meals. We wear jeans and nobody comments. We laugh more, relax more, actually enjoy each other's company instead of performing enjoyment for an invisible audience. Elijah and I are stronger now too. We learned how to communicate better, how to address problems before they fester, how to be a united team even when family dynamics get complicated. He's more aware now of power dynamics, of subtle manipulation tactics, of the importance of believing your partner when they tell you something's wrong. And me, I learned that fitting in isn't worth losing yourself. That sometimes the person calling you difficult is actually the one making things difficult. That standing up for yourself, even when it costs you relationships and causes conflict, is better than slowly disappearing under the weight of someone else's expectations. The screenshots are still out there somewhere, I suppose, floating around in the digital archives of that family Facebook group. But now they exist alongside the truth, the full conversations, the evidence of Victoria's manipulation, the proof that sometimes the villain in the story is the person pointing fingers at everyone else. I kept copies of everything, not because I'm vindictive, but because I never want to forget what it feels like to be gaslit, to be systematically undermined, to have your reality questioned by people who should have your back. I keep them as a reminder to trust myself, to believe my own perceptions, to never let anyone make me feel crazy for seeing what's right in front of me. Sometimes people ask me if I regret marrying into the Thompson family, if all the drama and manipulation and conflict was worth it. And the answer is complicated, because yes, it was worth it, but not for the reasons they might think. It was worth it because I met Elijah, and despite everything, despite his initial blindness to Victoria's behavior, he's a good man who learned and grew and became the partner I needed. It was worth it because I discovered strength I didn't know I had, resilience I hadn't needed to access before. It was worth it because I learned invaluable lessons about family dynamics, about manipulation, about the importance of documentation and evidence when someone is systematically trying to rewrite your reality. And perhaps most importantly, it was worth it because I learned that you can survive someone trying to destroy your reputation, your relationships, your sense of self, and come out the other side not just intact but stronger. The money helped too, I won't lie. $225,000 is life-changing for a young couple trying to build a future. We bought a beautiful house in a neighborhood we love, nothing like the ostentatious mansions the Thompson family favors, but perfect for us. We paid off our student loans, invested some, kept some as an emergency fund. We have security now, breathing room, options we wouldn't have had otherwise. But I would have walked away from every penny if it meant protecting my marriage and my sanity. The money was never the point, despite what Victoria tried to claim. The point was being seen, being valued, being treated like an actual member of the family instead of an outsider who needed to constantly prove her worth. Robert and Patricia have made efforts to rebuild our relationship. They admitted they'd relied too heavily on Victoria to maintain family cohesion, that they'd abdicated their responsibility as parents and grandparents by letting her control the narrative. They're trying now, really trying, to be present and supportive without the performance and pressure. Patricia actually pulled me aside a few months after everything went down and apologized, truly apologized, with tears in her eyes. "I saw what she was doing to you," she admitted. "I saw the comments, the criticism, the way she positioned herself as superior, and I told myself it was just Victoria being Victoria, that she meant well. But I knew better. I knew better and I didn't protect you, and I'm so sorry." That conversation meant more to me than she probably realized. It was validation that I hadn't imagined it, that the manipulation had been real and visible to others, that my perception of the situation had been accurate all along. Sophia and I are genuinely close now. She confessed that she'd been terrified of Victoria too, walking on eggshells at every family gathering, never quite measuring up to the impossible standards. We text almost daily now, normal sister-in-law stuff, sharing memes and complaining about work and making plans that don't require family approval. She's dating someone new, a wonderful man named Lucas Rivera who comes from a completely normal, drama-free family. And she's learning what it's like to be in a relationship that doesn't require constant performance and perfection. I'm so happy for her, for this chance to discover who she is outside of Victoria's shadow. As for Grayson, his relationship with Elijah is slowly, painfully rebuilding. It will never be what it was. The easy brotherhood and automatic trust is gone forever, but they're trying. They meet for coffee sometimes, awkward conversations where Grayson apologizes and Elijah accepts but can't quite forgive, not yet. Grayson claims he didn't fully understand what Victoria was doing, that he was as manipulated as anyone else, that he just wanted to support his wife. And maybe there's some truth to that. But he also went along with it, helped her, participated in the scheme to exclude us from the inheritance. Intent matters less than impact, and the impact of his actions nearly destroyed his brother's marriage. I can be civil to him at family gatherings, but I'll never trust him again. That's the cost of his choices, and he's going to have to live with it. Victoria herself, I haven't seen or heard from since that day at her house when everything came crashing down. I heard through the family grapevine that she and Grayson divorced quietly about 8 months after the revelation. She moved back to her hometown, got a job in event planning apparently, started over in a place where nobody knew about the Thompson family drama. Part of me wonders if she learned anything, if she looked at the wreckage of what her manipulation had caused and felt genuine remorse. But a larger part of me suspects she just sees herself as the victim in this story, the misunderstood woman who was only trying to maintain family standards and got attacked for her efforts. People like Victoria rarely see themselves clearly. They're so invested in the narrative they've constructed, so committed to their version of events, that they genuinely believe their own spin. She probably tells people back in Ohio about her terrible in-laws who turned on her, about the sister-in-law who was jealous of her position in the family, about how she was forced to leave because they were so unreasonable. And maybe some people believe her. Maybe she's found new friends and a new community who accept her version of events without question. Maybe she's even happier now, away from the constant pressure of maintaining her Thompson family matriarch persona. I hope so, actually. Not because I've forgiven her or because I think what she did was okay, but because carrying that much anger and resentment and need for control must be exhausting. I hope she finds peace somehow, finds a way to be herself without constantly performing for an audience, finds relationships where she doesn't feel the need to manipulate and control. But that's not my responsibility. My responsibility is to my own healing, my own growth, my own future. Elijah and I talk sometimes about having kids, about what kind of family we want to create. And we're both very aware that we want something different from what he grew up with. We want authenticity over performance, connection over tradition for tradition's sake, kindness over adherence to arbitrary standards. We want our children, if we have them, to know that love isn't conditional on meeting someone else's expectations. That family should be a soft place to land, not a stage where you're constantly being evaluated. That it's okay to be imperfect, to make mistakes, to be yourself even when yourself doesn't fit someone else's ideal. Those are the lessons I learned from this whole ordeal, and they're worth more than any inheritance. I've also learned about the power of evidence, of documentation, of keeping records when someone is systematically trying to gaslight you. It sounds paranoid maybe, but it's not paranoia when someone is actually manipulating your reality. Those screenshots I kept, those full conversations I preserved, they were the difference between being painted as a villain and proving the truth. So now I trust but verify. I document but don't obsess. I believe people, but I also believe my own perceptions. It's a balance I'm still learning, but it's an important one. Friends ask me sometimes if I'm bitter, if the whole experience has made me cynical about marriage or family or in-laws. And the honest answer is no, not really. What happened with Victoria was specific to her insecurities and her need for control and her willingness to manipulate for personal gain. That's not representative of all in-laws or all family dynamics. Most people, I've learned, are doing their best. Most family conflicts come from misunderstanding or different expectations or poor communication, not from deliberate manipulation. Most in-laws genuinely want to welcome new family members, even if they don't always know how to do it well. Victoria was an outlier, someone whose own issues manifested in particularly destructive ways. Understanding that has helped me not carry fear or mistrust into other relationships. I've also learned that money really does change things, even in families that claim to be above such concerns. The Thompson family likes to believe they're different, that their wealth doesn't affect their relationships or their values, but Eleanor's inheritance brought out truths that had been lurking beneath the surface for years. Victoria's behavior escalated dramatically once there was money at stake, but the seeds of it had been there all along. The need for control, the positioning, the manipulation, those weren't new. The inheritance just raised the stakes high enough that she felt justified in taking more extreme measures. And maybe that's the real lesson. That you can't truly know someone until you see how they behave when something valuable is on the line, when they have to choose between integrity and personal gain, when maintaining their facade requires them to actively harm someone else. Victoria chose personal gain. She chose to lie, to manipulate, to fabricate evidence, all to protect what she saw as her position and her financial interest. And in doing so, she revealed exactly who she was beneath the perfect daughter-in-law performance. I'm grateful, in a strange way, that she made that choice. Because the alternative was spending years, maybe decades, under a subtle manipulation, slowly losing myself and my marriage without ever quite understanding why. The revelation was painful, the family conflict was brutal, but it was also clarifying. It forced everyone to see what had been happening, to choose sides, to decide what kind of family they wanted to be. And we chose honesty over harmony, truth over tradition, authenticity over performance. That wasn't the easy choice, but it was the right one. These days, when I look at the house Elijah and I bought with our inheritance money, I think about Eleanor. I think about her including that clause in her will, about her foresight in protecting against manipulation, about her understanding that money can bring out the worst in people. I think she knew exactly what she was doing. I think she'd seen Victoria's true nature long before any of us did, and she set a trap that Victoria walked right into. And I think she'd be pleased with how it all turned out, pleased that the truth came to light, pleased that her grandson found the strength to stand up for his wife, pleased that her family survived the crisis and came out stronger. Sometimes I talk to her in my head, thanking her for the gift she gave us. Not just the money, though that was generous and life-changing. But the gift of revelation, of truth, of the tools we needed to expose manipulation and protect ourselves. Thank you, Eleanor, I think as I water the garden in the backyard of our new home. Thank you for seeing clearly, for planning wisely, for protecting us even after you were gone. The garden is my project, something I never could have done at Victoria's perfect events where everything had to be just so. It's messy and experimental, full of plants I'm learning to grow through trial and error. Some things thrive and some things die, and it's all okay, all part of the process. That's what life is, I've learned. Messy and imperfect and full of trial and error. And that's not just okay, it's beautiful. Victoria tried to make everything perfect, controlled, precisely curated. And in doing so, she created something brittle and false, something that shattered the moment real pressure was applied. I'd rather have messy and real than perfect and fake. Every single time. Elijah comes out into the garden, hands me a glass of lemonade, kisses my forehead. We're having Sophia and Lucas over for dinner tonight, nothing fancy, just burgers on the grill and salad from our garden and easy conversation with people we genuinely like. No performance required. No standards to meet. No invisible audience to please. Just family, the real kind, the kind that's built on love and trust and showing up for each other when things get hard. That's Eleanor's real legacy, I realize. Not the money or the mansion or the perfect family image. But this, the understanding that true family isn't about maintaining appearances or following traditions or meeting someone else's standards. True family is about seeing each other clearly, accepting each other fully, and choosing each other consistently. That's what Victoria never understood. And that's what ultimately destroyed her carefully constructed world. I learned it though, learned it the hard way through conflict and pain and nearly losing everything that mattered. And now, standing in my messy garden with my husband beside me and real family coming over soon, I wouldn't change a thing. Because the truth, no matter how painful, is always better than a beautiful lie. And I'm finally, truly, completely free.